Hello and welcome to What's Bubbling at ZIM Bubbling. I'm inventor Dan Zen, and in this bubbling we're going to take a look at lesson module 2, one of the specific examples in there. And we've already done a previous bubbling that introduces what we're looking at. Just in a quick review of that, let's take a look here. So we have two blobs, and one blob we're manipulating. We're moving it around, and we're trying to match the other blob. You can use this slider so that you can sort of see the other blob. So here we are manipulating this to try and match that. Oh, what does that do? That flips around like that maybe, or something like that. This one maybe into here. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. You see how we're using the Bezier points then to try and match these blobs. There's still something going on with that one. Anyway, I don't want to spend time doing that. Let's show the answer. So there's the answer. This one needed to be down here and brought up. And when we get the answer, when it all matches up, and I have matched it, by the way, it's not that hard to do. It's a good puzzle, good level of a puzzle. This one was here, and we're spinning it that way. As soon as it matches, bidding, we go off to another site. Okay, so we want to take a look into the code to see how we did this. The first step is just showing how we make a random blob. So each time we run this thing, we're getting a blob. There's a blob, there's a blob, there's a blob, etc. And then in fades the blob that we get to work with. So the first blob, the purple one, is called the model, and the blue blob is just called blob, blue blob. Okay, let's go into the code and see what that looks like. So here's the code for that exercise, and maybe just before we go into the exercise code, let's take a review of what comes in the lesson. So sorry, this is quite small over on the left-hand side, but we won't take all that long doing it. So here's the module 2 that we open up, and in there is a folder for the teacher. There's also a module 2 folder, and the module 2 folder is zipped up. The module 2 folder is what you would give the student. And the teacher you would keep for yourself. And in there, in the teacher, there's two workshops, workshop 3 and workshop 4. And we're looking at the exercises as part of workshop 4. Workshop 4 is, by the way, let's just open up the final version of the meme. It takes you through steps, meme 1, meme 2, meme 3, and then there's a final version. And let's just view the final version right now. So this is a meme maker. We can click and we can load in a picture and move the picture about and add some text. Hello world, like that, and add that, and we get a hello world where we can change the size of it. So it's a meme maker, add a drop shadow, etc. Hello world. All right, and that's a panel that collapses and drags. So the workshop, and indeed the lesson, is to make that. Now, each step of the way is smaller. So here's the first hour. In the first hour, you would make this. Open in browser. A picture is hard-coded in there. You can adjust the size of it and spin it. And then the panels over here are just the setup for the panel and a bit of collapsing. And do we get the drag? We get the drag. So that's what you would make in the first hour. And it would have steps for that. So if we scroll down here in the code, step 1, load the asset. Step 2, when the asset's complete, do this, etc., etc. So that's what the lessons are like. The one thing that we want to show is the exercise for that, and the exercise we probably give the student about an hour to work through the steps, and it tells you the steps that you're supposed to do to make this blob thing. Now let's go through it ourselves then. Okay, so we're going to introduce the code. What we'll do is in this current capture, which is a bubbling, we will take a look at how to make a random blob, as well as we'll review some of the other things that we're doing here in ZIM. So we come on down, we've got a frame. When it's ready, we're going to make a panel. Now in this case, we use a ZIM pane to make a panel. Now a ZIM pane is really supposed to be for making a pop-up window. So if we open this up in a browser, this is the pane right here. And like I said, panes are usually made for a pop-up window, and if we pressed off it, it would close the pane. Or Actually, I think we've got it by default setting up so that if we press on it, it will also close the pane. But in this case, we're just using a pane so that we can get our drop shadow and our rectangle and our dragability all pretty easily. And here's what we're doing. We're saying stage will be the container for that. We're setting the modal to false, and what that will do is it won't close when we click off it. We set the background alpha to 0, 2 because normally a pop-up window darkens the background around, but now we're saying the alpha of that is 0. Setting the drag to true and a corner of 0 and making it pink. And then we're showing the panel and we're moving it down 200. Okay, so that's our panel that we're going to start working on. Here's our slider. We've got a min and a max of the slider. We did set the inside of the slider to true, and we've added that to the panel and moved it over a little bit. So the reason why we set the inside to true is you see this handle right here. Normally, as you drag that, the center of the handle would go to the end of the bar. In other words, the button here, the handle would overlap, like would go over the edge. And if it does go over the edge, then it doesn't align with the checkbox below. You could solve that by moving the bar in, but then the bar won't align with it. When the button's over here, the button would align, but the bar wouldn't when the button's, over here. So what we decided to do was just set the inside to true, and what that's usually used for is you would make a thick bar, and this button would act inside the bar, and it would be like a scroll bar. Okay, but we're using it here to handle alignment. Great. We also have the slider's current value is 1. So if we take that away, and then the slider starts off at the 0 position, and yet here our circle has an alpha of 1. So we're going to see a bit of a disconnect as we use this. Pop. You see that? So if we know that this is going to be starting at an alpha of 1, we want the slider to start at 1 as well. So all this is bubbling. This has been around. This is the basics of ZIM. Okay, next we have a blob, so that's kind of important. And this is the blue blob, And its type is set as mirror, because if we didn't, well, here, let me show you what a mirror looks like. So, oh, we've got it there. When we pull the one side here, the other side mirrors it. Okay, reflects around the middle there. And what that's going to do is it's going to make it easier for us to match this shape. The default of a blob, if we take that out, is straight. And here's what straight looks like. So we have to wait for that to animate in. Here's straight. When we pull the one side, it keeps the line straight, but it doesn't mirror. So we can independently work on these two sides. And that would be harder to then match the pattern. And indeed, you'll see that the blob in behind, by default, all of its things are mirrored. So, we may as well keep the blob that we're moving mirrored as well and make this puzzle a little bit easier. Okay, so we want the mirror in there. We're center edging that on the stage and putting it at the bottom, and we're moving it a little bit up. Okay, so this is the blue blob, and we want the blue blob to go to the bottom so that it goes underneath the slider. If it didn't go to the bottom, if we just center edged that on the stage, here's roughly what it would do. There it is, and when I move the panel, we didn't put the blob down in behind, so now the panel goes underneath it, which we don't want. Okay. So next we've got the slider here, and what we're doing is we're saying the blob's shapes alpha is the slider's current value. So that's a little bit different than you might think. Normally we would say, hey, let's make the alpha of the blob equal to the slider's current value. Let's see what happens when we do that. We refresh. You know what? Each time we're having to wait for this to animate in, I can show you how we can solve that problem. But did you experience it? Like, oh, come on, we're wanting to test something. We have to wait for this thing to animate in. Sigh. That is a problem when building, especially if you're animating a bunch of stuff in to start and you're wanting to test as you go. We don't want to keep on waiting for those animations. So when we go back into the code, I'll show you how we can fix that up. But for now, what were we looking at? Oh, I can't even remember. What did we look at? Slider's current value. Oh, the blob's alpha, right. So if we take the slider and drop it down, now you can see that the whole blob's alpha goes away. And even if you're halfway here, this would be roughly where you're working, so you can see both shapes at the same time. you can see that these still work, but you can see little sticks through there. So we don't want that. We don't want the whole blob's alpha to go down. We just want the shape of the blob to have its alpha down. So that's blob.shape. In other words, shape is a property of the blob that references only the shape of the blob. So we save that and refresh here. And wait, grats, now we wait for that to come back in, and we reduce the alpha, and you can see that the sticks are still around, which was kind of fun. It was fun actually changing these sticks and wondering, I wonder what the shape will look like now. What do you think the shape will look like? Are you ready? Oh, did you expect that? Of course you did. Yes, you're an expert in these things. No, but there, I could see that there'd be something fun that you can do in trying to build a shape without looking at the shape. Okay, that aside though, what were we going to do? Oh yeah, let's do it now. There's a place where we animate in the blob, and that is right here, blob.animate. So we've got this set in a special way. We're using from equals true. So what we're doing is we position the object, in this case the blob, in the place that we want and with all the properties that we want, such as its alpha will be 1 and it's centered on the stage. And then we use the from parameter here on animate, and we animate from a certain value. So here we are animating the alpha from 0 up to 1. What that means is if we were to comment this out, it would no longer start off at 0, it would no longer wait, and it would no longer spend 1 second animating up from alpha of 0. In other words, it'd be in its final resting place. Yay! So we can just comment that out and refresh here, and the blob shows up. You get it? Now this might be, we might have had the blob animate from off stage. So what we would do is we would position the X and Y at the right place, and then we would animate from like an X of minus 100 or something like that, or minus 110. You want to see what that looks like? So that's back in, and we refresh here, no blob, and after 2 seconds, the blob animates from off stage. Well, if we don't want to wait for that, and especially if we have a bunch of these, we might have a bunch of things animating in, all with delays, one after another, and 5 seconds, 10 seconds later, we're ready to test the rest of the stuff. We don't want that to happen. Now, if you had a bunch of these, it's a pain in the neck to sort of comment them all out and uncomment them. So what we did, and this is the nice thing about a framework, is we said, hey, let's set it up right here, ZIM.animate, capital letters, false. And what this will do is it will stop all of the animation from happening. And therefore, we get this. There it is. It didn't animate in from that place. It just started at its current properties, which was centered alpha up. All right, isn't that neat? Now let's see, we want to change that back, don't we, in the animate to an alpha here. And we're animating from an alpha of 0, and you'll see that that still works. I'll refresh here. And there she be. So now we don't have to wait all the time. It's just immediately there. Okay, so where do we get to next? Scrolling up. That was the slider. Did we talk about the blob yet? Yeah, we've got the mirror, and there it is centered on the stage. Good. That was the slider. Super. Now, here's the model. This is the blob that is in behind, because we centered it on the stage and put it at 0 again. So we sort of made these in a slightly different order. You know what I mean? If you could, if we wanted to, make the model first, put it on the stage, and then make the blob, and then put it on the stage, and then one would go on top of one another. But now we're just sort of doing it in reverse and constantly putting the new thing at the back. Sorry if that was confusing. Now another thing, just while we look at this blob in behind, let's comment out the center reg of the other blob. So we're going to be looking at the model. Here's the blue blob, and we're commenting that out now. So all we're going to do is see the model. So we save that and refresh. There's the model. Okay, so how did we make it this random shape each time? Let's take a look. So that's where we're at now. Here's the model. We said make it purple. We said show controls false because we don't want to see the controls to start, and lock controls true. That means when we do show the controls, we cannot change them. So when we refresh here and get that and show the controls, I can't change those controls. They've been locked. All right, that's the answer. We don't want to shift the answer around. Okay, so lock controls true. Where was I doing? Oh yeah, okay. So that's that stuff. And then we've got these random control lengths. So let's just, it's using a ZIMV object. So we're gonna comment out that for now, and let's just put in 100. Okay, so now, oh, the other thing that's doing random too, though, that's part of the random thing, but the other part for the random is this next step where we're looping through a bunch of stuff and doing things. So let's just comment that out as well. So basically we've got a blob going on with a control length of 100. I think that might be the default. Let's just see. Yeah, that is the default. Oh, and why don't we show the handle so I don't have to keep on saying show answer there. So the 100 happens to be the default. So if we didn't show anything there, and let's take our show controls and comment that out. By default, that's true. We will see that. Okay, so you can set your own size for the control length. If we go to 300 like that and save this and refresh, now they're 300, and that's how your blob would start. And we still can't edit those. But as of ZIM 5.2.1, we are able to pass in a ZIMv value here. So that could be like what we've got here, where we're saying make it random, or it could be an array, and we could say, oh, make it either 100 or 300, and then comment that out. So now it will pick between those two numbers of 100 and 300, and when we refresh, there's some of them at 300, one of them at random. So now we're starting to see some different random blob shapes. Isn't that nice? Okay. So this one, if we don't just pick from those two, we use this ZIMv object right here. Oops, other bracket, squiggly, there she be. This will take a minimum between 50 and 400. So if we do that, we end up getting all sorts of different sizes there. So that's one way to get random, but more than that, we want to move these points around randomly to different places and even rotate them randomly. And that's what this loop is doing down below. So let's bring back the loop and take a look through it. So we're setting a variable as to how much we're going to shift the X and Y positions. We're looping through the sets property of the model. The sets property gives us all of the containers that hold the points. Okay, so if we look here, this point and these two sticks are in a set, and this point and those two sticks are in a set, or not the sticks actually, like the rectangles. Sticks are even outside, by the way. But the things that we want to be able to move are in this set container. So each time in our ZIM loop, we're getting the set. And I love ZIM loop. I've now been using it for, I don't know, 4 or 5 months. And I mean, it is just so much easier to loop through things now than using a for loop. ZIM loop just makes a for loop in the background, so you may as well use it. It's much easier. So here we are looping through all of the things in that array, and each time we get the index of the array. Okay, or not the index, sorry, what's at that index of the array. If you want the index, that's just right there. Okay, so the next parameter is the index. So what we're going to do is take that set and we're going to move it to a random location. This is the X property right here, a random between minus shift and shift. And we're going to move the Y, the same deal. And we're going to take that set and rotate it a random amount. Now, this is a tricky bit. You see the model.update there? You see that? Let's make it a bit bigger. Model.update, if we comment that out, sorry, we comment that out, something very strange happens. Are you ready? Oh my goodness, what a mess. Looks a bit like a Miro or something like that. It's abstract art. Yes, but anyway, the blob does not actually update if you hard code a change in its pieces. So that's just us physically moving those pieces around manually, in a sense. And we don't want to do that. Well, I mean, we have done that, but we don't want to leave it like that because we want to tell the model to please update now. So that requires an extra method afterward, model.update. And now we get this. Yay! So it updated the model and made everything, put the sticks in the right place and made everything work properly. Okay, so don't forget that. All right, let's back up a little bit. We made a random model. Well, there's a checkbox. Yeah, okay, so we need to bring back our other one, which was, well, we're going to show controls back to false there. And what was it? This one, center reg. See how it's nice? I like how when we can chain, we can just comment out things in the chaining. And same with when we put them here on separate lines, we can just comment out certain ones that we want. ZIM duo technique there of the configuration object. Right, we can chain those two and drop them down. Well, they are chained, but we can drop them down to the next lines. All right, so we've made our loops. Here's a checkbox, and what we've said is the model's control points. Oh, right, sorry, this was control points on the model, so we didn't need to bring back that other blue thing, but this will change the control points, whether we're seeing them or not, to whatever the checkbox's checked property is. So that's, we saw that happening here, Cledink, where we're showing and hiding the control points based on the checkbox. So that's so easy, isn't it? Isn't that nice? And we talked about the animating. That's great. We've got an instructions label that's up at the top. And then we get into our extra bit here where we are determining whether we have matched, whether the blob that we're controlling matches the model blob in behind. And why don't we leave that to another bubbling? Right, that will be exciting. So come on back to that. I'm Inventor Dan Zen here at What's Bubbling at ZIM. Yeah, and if you tune into the next bubbling, you'll see how we did it so that we matched those shapes. It's something I've always wanted to do. So we'll see you then. Ciao.